Welcome to the Fatter Wallet Show, where faith meets finance and wisdom shapes work. Each episode explores how timeless principles of stewardship, wealth, and purpose can transform the way you live and build.
And today we are embarking on quite a critical exploration, really, looking at what financial independence actually looks like in practice. We're going to be analyzing the extensive research that, well, it pretty much redefined the image of success. We're focusing on the findings from that groundbreaking study, the Millionaire Next Door.
Yeah, it's fascinating because the media for, decades now, has pushed this one particular narrative.
Yeah.
Wealth equals hyperconsumption. You think luxury imports, custom suits, those huge, sprawling estates.
Right. The lifestyles of the rich and famous kind of thing.
Exactly. But this investigation, it reveals that this popular image is, well, almost entirely backwards. So our mission today is to really unpack the true nature of wealth and expose the counterintuitive habits of the real wealth accumulators, the people who quietly, master the game.
This is basically your shortcut to understanding the profound difference between income and net worth, and crucially, why chasing status often guarantees you might never actually achieve financial freedom.
So before we even jump into those 7 habits of highly effective wealth builders, we really have to clear up a fundamental misconception, don't we?
We absolutely do.
The average person just assumes that a high income, let's say $500,000 a year, automatically translates into high wealth. But, you've shown us that high consumption, no matter the income, is often just a financial illusion. Sometimes it's even funded by debt.
That's the absolutely critical starting point. If you confuse those two, income and wealth, you will likely spend your entire life being what the research calls an under-accumulator of wealth.
Right.
The research sets a pretty simple nominal threshold for wealth, the household net worth of $1 million or more. Now, when this data was first compiled, that was a really small fraction of the population, maybe 3.5% of American households back in 1996.
And here's where that traditional narrative just completely collapses. Because if you think about a millionaire, you picture a specific zip code, right? Like a high status, really exclusive neighborhood.
Exactly. Bel Air, the Hamptons, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yet the study found that nearly half, almost 50% of all millionaires do not live in those upscale, high-status neighborhoods. They are what we can call low-profile millionaires.
Yeah.
Low profile.
Yeah. Their homes are typically solid, functional, well-maintained, but honestly, entirely unremarkable. They just blend in.
That invisibility must be a massive advantage for actually accumulating wealth, mustn't it? If your neighbors don't perceive you as wealthy, they don't pressure you to conform to some hyper-expensive lifestyle.
That's a huge part of it.
Their wealth isn't visible in the driveway or on their wrists. It's stored somewhere else. Exactly. It's stored in places that tend to appreciate, things like closely held businesses, commercial real estate, diversified stock portfolios, tax-deferred accounts. It is definitely not displayed in assets that depreciate the second they leave the showroom floor.
Like that fancy new car?
Precisely. The entire methodology of the study uses something called the wealth equation. It's basically a metric that calculates your expected net worth based on your age and your annual realized income.
And this equation, it kind of separates the winners from the losers, financially speaking. It defines the 2 major categories that really drive the narrative of this whole study.
That's right. We define success in accumulation as being a PAW, which stands for a prodigious accumulator of wealth. These are the folks whose net worth is significantly above what that equation predicts for their age and income group, often like 4 times or even more the expected level of their peers. They're the masters of financial defense.
Okay, PAW. Prodigious accumulator. Got it. And the flip side.
Conversely, you have the UAW, or the under-accumulator of wealth. Now, these people have an actual net worth dramatically below the expected level. They might earn, say, $250,000 a year, but they live pretty much month to month. They're relying entirely on that big paycheck just to maintain appearances.
Wow. So high income, but low actual wealth.
Exactly. We can illustrate this gap by contrasting 2 very different men who had pretty similar incomes. Consider Mr. Miller Bubba Richards. His income profile doesn't exactly scream Wall Street. He's a mobile home dealer. His annual income was about $90,200. Respectable, sure, but not phenomenal.
Right.
Yet his actual net worth was $1.1 million. He is a textbook Paul, accumulating wealth far, far beyond his expected level for that income.
Okay, so Bubba, the mobile home dealer, is a PAW. And who's the UAW in this comparison?
On the other side, you have the man who kind of fits the cultural stereotype of success, James H. Ford II. Mr. Ford is an attorney, a high-status professional. His annual income was actually slightly higher than Richards's at $92,330. But his actual net worth was only $226,511. He's a UAW. Based on his income and age, he really should have easily been worth $500,000 or more.
So he accumulated less than half of what he should have, based on the formula.
Less than half. And Richards, the mobile home dealer, had nearly 5 times his net worth. Same income bracket, drastically different outcomes.
That's incredible. I think many people listening would probably look at Mr. Ford, the attorney, and just assume he's wealthy because he drives the right car, lives in the right neighborhood. But you're saying the difference isn't really the ability to earn, it's the lifestyle that's dictated by the perception of status. Mr. Ford feels compelled to look the part of a successful attorney, and that just devours his entire high income.
Precisely. His high income almost becomes a liability because it sort of forces him into high-status consumption. Expensive office space, club membership fees, luxury cars, designer clothing, all seen as necessary to maintain the appearance required by his profession.
Whereas Bubba Richards,
the mobile home dealer, faces basically none of that social pressure. He can drive a perfectly functional domestic car, live a frugal middle-class lifestyle, and that allows him to just stockpile his income into appreciating assets.
it really is the ultimate lesson, isn't it? That pressure to display high social status seems to be the single greatest inhibitor of wealth accumulation.
It's a huge factor, and the research synthesized this whole reality into 7 common denominators found among those who successfully build wealth. If you're looking for the financial blueprint, this is pretty much it.
Okay, let's lay them out. What are these 7 factors? We can use this as our roadmap for the discussion.
Sounds good. Number 1, they live well below their means. Seems obvious, but crucial.
Okay.
Number 2, they allocate their time, energy, and money efficiently.
Efficiency. Got it.
3, financial independence is more important to them than displaying high social status. That ties back to what we were just saying.
Right, values.
4, their parents did not provide something called economic outpatient care. We'll definitely unpack that one.
Intriguing. Okay.
5, their adult children are economically self-sufficient. Related to number 4, obviously.
Makes sense. Generational independence.
6, they are proficient in targeting market opportunities. They know where to find value.
Opportunity spotting.
And finally, number 7, they chose the right occupation. Often, but not always, self-employment plays a big role here. Hashtag tag 2, the Frugal Foundation, factors 1 and 3.
All right, so if we're going to start building our own PAW profile, it absolutely has to begin with that foundation, factors 1 and 3. Living below your means and valuing independence over status.
Definitely.
And the study uses these 3 words, repeated, to profile the affluent. Frugal, frugal, frugal.
Yes. Frugality is simply economy in the use of resources. It's not about being cheap or deprived. It's not penury. It's conscious control. And this finding just stands in stark opposition to the image of the millionaire we get from movies and advertising, which always promotes wasteful hyperconsumption.
Right, the champagne and private jets image.
Exactly, which is rarely the reality for the accumulators.
We see this reflected in the sort of low-profile lifestyle of people described in the research, like Misty and her husband. This is a couple who are financially independent, yet their outward appearance is just entirely, well, pedestrian.
Yeah, the details are great. Misty wears a Timex watch. Her husband wears a Seiko. Not exactly Rolex territory.
Definitely not.
They shop at places like Dillard's, JCPenney, and TJ Maxx for their clothes. And they buy Fords, not Ferraris, just practical choices.
This invisible lifestyle seems to be the absolute key. Think about Johnny Lucas, the guy who owns a janitorial contracting business.
Right, another great example.
At 57, he's got a net worth over $2 million. But his neighbors, they probably perceive him as maybe a blue-collar worker or lower middle class at best.
They see his functional vehicle, maybe his work truck. They don't see the investment portfolio or the valuable commercial contracts his company holds. This perception gap is precisely what allows him to keep accumulating without social pressure.
Let's talk specifics on spending, because the data on their consumption habits is just, it's eye-opening. What did the study find was the median price paid by a millionaire for things most people consider key status items?
Yeah.
Like a suit or shoes or a watch.
It is startlingly low. For their most expensive suit of clothing ever purchased, 50% of the millionaires studied paid $399 or less.
$399 or less for their most expensive suit.
That's the median. Only 1 in 10 ever paid $1,000 or more for a suit.
Wow.
For shoes, the median price paid was $140 or less. half paid less than that.
Okay.
And maybe the most telling one, for a wristwatch, often seen as the ultimate daily status symbol, half paid $235 or less. And get this, 1 in 10 paid $47 or less.
Wait, I have to stop you there. $47.
What?
For a wristwatch. For someone with $1 million or more in net worth.
That's what the data showed for 1 in 10.
That implies a complete divorce from that social expectation that your accessories have to reflect your earning power.
Absolutely. The status is simply irrelevant to them. They prioritize function, value, maybe reliability. Contrast that with the stereotypical UAW, the corporate middle manager trying to climb the ladder, or the young attorney who often wears a watch costing several $1,000s.
Right.
The researchers often encountered people like trust officers in banks wearing $5,000 watches, an amount the vast majority of actual millionaires would never even consider spending on a timepiece.
So if the actual millionaires, the PAWs, are prioritizing frugality, who on earth is buying all the expensive suits, the $1,000 shoes, the fancy watches, the luxury cars? This brings us right to the consumption trap, doesn't it?
It does. And the answer is, it's overwhelmingly the high-income non-millionaires, the UAWs. The data shows that for every one millionaire who owns, say, a $1,000 suit, there are at least 6 high-income non-millionaires purchasing them.
6 to 1.
At least. These are typically the professionals who feel they must maintain a public image of success. Corporate vice presidents, high-end sales professionals, or maybe high-earning attorneys and physicians who just haven't accumulated commensurate wealth yet, or maybe ever will.
It sounds like a kind of self-reinforcing tragedy. They have high income, which is a great offensive weapon in finance.
Great offense, yes.
But they immediately turn it into visibility and consumption, often fueled by this psychological belief that their position demands this display.
Yeah.
They're essentially buying the facade of success, not the substance.
And that facade is often debt-driven, or at least consumes every dollar earned.
Huh.
They are playing wonderful offense, earning a high salary, but they have disastrous defense. The PAWs, on the other hand, play both quality offense and quality defense.
Okay.
They might earn well, maybe not always spectacularly well, but their defense saving, budgeting, planning is impeccable. And the research proves pretty convincingly that the high-quality defense of even a moderate-income PAW often allows them to out-accumulate a high-income UAW who focuses purely on that flashy offense.
But I do want to explore the psychological pressure there for a second. Is it possible that for some UAWs, particularly those in, say, client-facing roles, high-status roles, that high consumption is actually a necessary investment? Could that $1,000 suit or that luxury car be seen as an expensive but necessary marketing tool, convincing clients you're successful enough to trust with their business?
That's a valid point, and it's an argument you hear. Professional service providers often argue that visible status enhances their credibility. However, the study strongly suggests that this is more often a rationalization than a reality. Many of the most successful PAW professionals, especially the self-employed ones, tend to prioritize competence, results, and referral networks over flashy displays. They might invest in a high-quality, long-lasting item, sure, but they won't be churning through new models or brands every single year just for show.
So the clients care more about results.
Yeah. Generally, yes. Their clients seem more concerned with results and trust than they are with the current vintage of the car their attorney drives. Plus, when you look at how much high-income UAWs spend on general consumption, things like food, clothing unrelated to work, household goods, it far exceeds any justifiable marketing expenditure. They seem to confuse maintaining a professional image with just personal extravagance.
So the PAW gets it. They realize that defense, anchored by that extreme frugality and disciplined budgeting, is the real path to freedom, not just some, necessary evil to endure.
Exactly. Defense wins championships, financially speaking.
Okay, so moving from that frugal mindset to actual execution. Factor 2, the efficient allocation of resources. Time, energy, and money. This is about actively transforming income into wealth, isn't it?
Yes. Wealth accumulation is an active process, not passive. It requires dedicating real time and energy to financial management. You don't just stumble into becoming a millionaire, usually.
Let's start with budgeting. I know many people listening probably just groaned. Budgeting feels restrictive, painful even. But for PAWs, it seems like it's a non-negotiable financial fitness routine.
The statistics are pretty clear on this one. For every 100 millionaires in the study who did not budget, there were 120 who did.
So more budgeters than non-budgeters among millionaires.
Significantly more. This indicates a conscious commitment to controlling consumption and directing capital where they want it to go. Think of the example of Mrs. Rule, described as a highly successful accumulator. She is goal-oriented. She tabulates every single expense, from grocery bills to utilities, not because she absolutely has to financially, but because she wants absolute control over her consumption to achieve a specific goal, which in her case was $5 million by retirement.
Wow.
That level of rigor, it transforms financial management from a chore into, like, a focused business objective for her household.
But you did mention that some millionaires don't budget. So how do they become PAWs if they aren't meticulously tracking every dime?
Good question. They typically employ a strategy the researchers called pay yourself first, which effectively creates artificial scarcity.
Artificial scarcity, how does that work?
They commit to automatically investing a minimum percentage, often 15% or significantly more of their pre-tax income, the absolute moment they receive it. It goes straight into investments or savings. Only then do they spend whatever is left over, the remaining balance. So consumption is restricted to the leftovers.
I see. So it achieves the same goal as budgeting, controlling spending, and prioritizing saving, but without maybe the detailed tracking.
Exactly. It's a different method to reach the same outcome. Investment comes first.
That distinction is really profound. The PAW ensures the investing gets done first, regardless of the specific method. Now, contrast that with the typical UAW couple described, Robert and Judy.
Right. Robert and Judy are a perfect, almost cautionary example of what happens when consumption is prioritized above all else. They earn a very respectable $200,000 annually. Pretty good income.
Yeah, definitely.
But their net worth is described as shockingly low for that income level. Why? Well, they are completely controlled by consumption. They don't track their spending. They have no real idea how much they spend on basic categories like food, clothing, or shelter each year.
They don't know where the money goes.
They know their income, sure, but they lack any measurable data on their outflows. They've effectively outsourced their financial decisions to impulse, convenience, and maybe social pressure, which pretty much guarantees they'll remain UAWs regardless of any future salary increases they might get.
That is just fascinating. And the ultimate illustration of this whole efficiency gap has to be the comparison between those two very high earners, Dr. North and Dr. South. This contrast, honestly, it should be mandatory reading for every high-income professional out there.
It really should. It is the definitive study within the book on the sheer power of defense. So Dr. South, he's a UAW physician, earned a very high income, $715,000 annually.
Wow.
Yet his net worth was only $400,000. He was deeply underwater relative to his earning power, just hadn't accumulated much at all.
Okay, $750 K income, $400 K net worth, UAW, and Dr. North.
Dr. North, a PAW physician, earned virtually the same income, $730,000. But his net worth was $7.5 million.
$7.5 million.
Yeah.
On basically the same income.
Exactly. Same profession, same earning power, fundamentally different accumulation results, all down to lifestyle and defense.
Okay, let's break down that consumption difference. It must be staggering.
It truly is. The Souths were textbook hyperconsumers. They supported a lifestyle that arguably required an income closer to $1.5 million, not $715K. For instance, they spent $30,000 on clothing annually.
30 grand on clothes.
Annually. While the North spent a much more modest $8,700. Still a decent amount, but vastly different.
Okay. What about cars? That's usually a big one.
Huge difference. On motor vehicles, a massive consumption category, the Souths allocated $72,200 per year. That implies constant turnover of new, expensive, probably imported luxury vehicles.
$72,000 a year on cars. Good grief.
And the Norths. The Norths spent $12,000 annually on vehicles. Suggests maybe buying reliable cars and keeping them for a long time, or perhaps leasing more modestly.
And the housing choices. I bet that's where the really big divergence is.
Absolutely. The housing costs are perhaps the most damning indictment of the UAW behavior. The Souths devoted $107,000 annually to their mortgage payments.
Over $100,000 a year just on the mortgage.
Mm-hmm. The Norths, only $14,600.
$14,000? How?
Well, Dr. North and his wife chose a modest, functional home that they likely paid off very quickly, minimizing their housing expense, which is usually the largest component of most people's consumption. The Souths, conversely, chose a home dictated by neighborhood status, resulting in this enormous ongoing debt. It served mainly as maybe a tax deduction rather than a truly appreciating investment for their future financial freedom.
So the Norths, while earning almost $750,000 a year, were basically consuming at the level of family, earning maybe only about 1/3 of their actual income.
That's the key insight. They lived on about $250K, $300K level, despite earning over $700.
So where did all the rest of that money go? The difference between 730K income and, say, 250K spending.
Right. The Norths invested nearly 40% of their pre-tax income, year after year. They also used accumulated investments, not current income, to pay for large expenses like their children's college education, thus avoiding that drain on their current income stream.
Smart.
The Souths, meanwhile, were spending virtually every dollar they earned, plus relying on credit, supporting these massive debt loads. Their entire financial independence was completely dependent on Dr. South's ability to keep working at that high income forever.
That's precarious.
Extremely. If Dr. South loses his job or ability to work, his lifestyle is immediately unsustainable. If Dr. North loses his job, well, he has $7.5 million in assets to support him and his family. Big difference in security.
Huge difference. And this efficiency, it isn't just about the cash flow, is it? It's also about how they allocate their time, directed towards productive activity. Do PAWs spend significantly more time actually managing their money and investments?
They absolutely do, and it's a measurable difference. The middle-income PAWs in the study, not even the super rich, spent an average of 8.4 hours per month planning their investments.
8.4 hours a month, so about 2 hours a week.
Roughly, yeah. That's about 1.2% of their total available time in a month dedicated specifically to growing their wealth. The UAWs, by comparison, spent only 4.6 hours per month on investment planning.
Less than half the time.
Almost half, yeah. The PAW dedicates almost twice the amount of time to planning, and critically, that time is focused on assets that appreciate things like their own businesses, commercial real estate, stocks, bonds, things that grow.
And the UAWs, what are they doing with their 4.6 hours, or maybe just generally with their money?
They tend to hold more cash equivalents, or investments that require very little management but also generate very little to no real growth. Think about money just sitting passively in low-interest savings accounts. Or even worse, being immediately converted into depreciating assets, like those new motor vehicles we talked about. They essentially allocate their limited financial planning time to not thinking deeply about money or to making consumptive choices.
Okay, let's talk about that 8.4 hours of efficient planning for the PAWs. A key part of that, I imagine, must be the rigor involved in selecting and hiring financial advisors. Many UAWs probably fall prey to cold calls or slick marketing, but the PAW seems to approach hiring financial professionals like a business hiring a crucial supplier.
The attitude is entirely different. You nailed it. The PAW recognizes their household as an economic unit, basically a business. And anyone they hire, accountant, lawyer, broker, is a supplier who must demonstrate clear value. The Martin method, described in the research, is the absolute gold standard of this efficiency. Mr. Martin, a self-made multimillionaire investor, had a very specific policy for dealing with stockbrokers who cold called him.
Oh, yeah. What was the policy? This sounds good.
He instructed his secretary to demand 2 specific things from any cold-calling broker before he'd even consider talking to them. First, copies of the broker's personal income tax returns from the last few years.
Their tax returns. Seriously.
Seriously. And second, a detailed list of what the broker had held in their own personal portfolio for the past 3 years, demonstrating their actual investment track record with their own money.
Wow. He was essentially saying, show me you're wealthy and successful using your own advice before you even think about touching my money.
Precisely. He correctly reasoned that if a broker was truly successful and effective with their own finances and their clients, they probably wouldn't be spending their valuable time cold calling strangers.
Right. Makes perfect sense.
Unsurprisingly, zero, not a single one of the dozens of cold callers who approached him ever followed up with the requested documentation. The Martin method saved him countless hours of wasted time and protected him from potentially poor or self-serving advice.
So how do PAWs typically find advisors they do trust and work with?
They rely on a trusted network for referrals. They typically find advisors, CPAs, attorneys, investment managers through referrals from other professionals they already trust, like their existing CPA or attorney, or from their most financially successful peers. This process ensures they establish high-quality, long-term relationships based on established trust and proven performance, minimizing the time spent constantly vetting new entrants and maximizing the efficiency of their overall financial planning. They manage their financial services infrastructure just like any highly profitable business would manage its key suppliers. Hashtag tag TechFuvy, the generational wealth transfer and dependency, factors 4 and 5.
Okay, this next area is one of the most fascinating and honestly sometimes painful lessons in the study. It revolves around factors 4 and 5. ensuring financial independence not just for yourself but across generations. We're talking about the perils of what the research calls economic outpatient care, or EOC.
Yes, EOC. It's defined as substantial economic gifts, subsidies, and various acts of kindness provided by affluent parents to their adult children who are, theoretically capable of providing for themselves.
So what kind of things count as EOC?
It could be anything from paying the tuition for the grandchildren's private school, providing large down payments for homes, maybe even covering monthly mortgage payments, or simply providing regular, substantial annual cash infusions. While the intention behind it is almost always loving,
Of course.
the actual impact is often, crippling to the recipient's financial development.
And the data on the impact of EOC is pretty devastating, isn't it? What did the study reveal about, say, professionals who receive these gifts versus those who don't?
The comparison is really stark. Take accountants, for example. The study found that accountants who receive substantial cash gifts from their parents tend to have only about 57% of the net worth and only 78% of the annual income compared to their peers in accounting who did not receive those gifts.
Wow, so receiving the gifts is correlated with lower income and much lower net worth.
That's what the data strongly suggests. EOC, rather than boosting prosperity, seems to diminish initiative, reduce productivity, and foster dependency. It basically facilitates a high-consumption, low-accumulation lifestyle because the recipients don't develop the habits needed to generate or manage wealth themselves.
Let's look at a concrete example of this dependency, the case of Marion Lamar.
Right, Marion Lamar. Lamar works as a college administrator, earning a perfectly respectable but moderate salary of less than $60,000. Yet he and Mary somehow sustain an upper-middle-class lifestyle that far, far outstrips their earned income. How did they do it?
EOC.
Exactly, EOC. They receive $15,000 in annual cash gifts. They live in a home that's heavily subsidized by Mary's parents, and they acquire new luxury cars every 3 years.
How are those funded?
Those are funded by liquidating gifted securities, stocks, and bonds from Mary's mother's portfolio that were given to them.
Okay, so the parents are providing them with potentially appreciating assets like stocks.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary and Lamar immediately sell those assets to buy rapidly depreciating liabilities, like high-end cars.
Precisely. The gifted capital is converted instantly into consumption. And the consequence is this crippling dependency. Mary and Lamar are described as being unproductive relative to their potential, and they consistently spend more than they earn. They dedicate immense emotional and mental energy not to maximizing their own earning power or building their own assets, but to anticipating the next cash gift, the next subsidy, or eventually the inheritance. They're essentially living in an economic fantasy land sustained entirely by external funding.
The researchers describe this whole phenomenon as affluent parents unintentionally weakening the weak, right? They feel compelled to support their children who seem to be struggling or are less successful, often because those children need the help just to maintain a lifestyle they perhaps became accustomed to growing up.
It really creates a perverse incentive system. Parents often, perhaps unconsciously, cut off financial support to the disciplined, highly motivated children, the strong ones, because, they don't need the money. This just reinforces their self-sufficiency, which is good.
Right.
But simultaneously, they heavily subsidize the struggling, perhaps high-consumption children, the weak ones, inadvertently reinforcing their dependency, stifling their self-confidence, and preventing them from developing those essential financial discipline and money management skills through their own struggles.
The heartbreaking case study of the two sisters, Sarah and Alice, really illustrates how this dependency can destroy character over the long term.
Oh, it's a powerful story. Sarah was the disciplined daughter. She actually defied her father's wishes regarding her career path, wanted to do her own thing, and as a result, he financially cut her off completely.
Marsh.
Very. She was forced to basically burn her bridges and succeed entirely on her own merit. And she did. She became a self-made, frugal, multi-millionaire executive. The struggle bred competence and resilience.
And Alice, her sister, the other daughter.
Alice was the subsidized daughter, described as the type B housewife, Papa's favorite. She received heavy EOC throughout her adult life, a subsidized home, regular cash gifts, and eventually she inherited the bulk of the considerable estate.
Okay, so she got the financial support. Did it help her long term?
Not at all. Alice and her husband lacked the financial discipline that Sarah had developed through her struggles. They quickly spent the entire inheritance, mostly on consumption and lavish travel. They became financially reliant again very shortly after all the money was gone.
Wow. Burned right through it.
Completely. And the tragedy wasn't just confined to Alice, it was unfortunately inherited by the next generation too.
How so?
Alice's children, who were raised in that high-consumption, low-discipline environment, were described as financially illiterate and pretty much unable to make it on their own financially. And in a really bitter twist of irony, it was Sarah, the semi-disinherited Cinderella, as the book calls her, who eventually had to step in and financially support her niece's futures and education.
That's incredible. So the daughter who got cut off ended up supporting the children of the daughter who got everything.
Exactly. The core lesson there is just so stark. Financial courage, discipline, independence. These are not commodities that can be purchased or gifted. They are character traits that absolutely must be developed, usually through some degree of struggling, saving, and achieving self-sufficiency on your own terms.
This dependency obviously creates massive conflict, especially when parents eventually need to think about transitioning their wealth. Think about the estate planning conflicts that must arise.
Oh, this is where parental good intentions often collide head-on with fairness and family harmony. Consider the example of Mr. Andrews. He required his productive, successful son, Billy, to purchase the family business from him, not inherit it, purchase it.
Okay, fair enough, maybe. Billy buys the business.
But then Mr. Andrews planned to take the revenue from that sale to Billy and give it primarily to his two less successful daughters, basically to subsidize their ongoing high consumption habits.
Wait, so Billy, the hardest worker and best accumulator in the family, was essentially being required to finance the consumption habits of his less productive siblings, even after his father was gone.
That was the plan. And it's a recipe for deep, lasting resentment and potential family breakdown.
Absolutely. So how do the successful PAWs, the ones who understand these dynamics, how do they mitigate this kind of strife and ensure that wealth transfer is productive, not destructive for their families?
The most financially astute PAWs recognize that money, improperly handled, can absolutely destroy family harmony. They often take steps like involving objective third-party professionals, trusted attorneys, or CPAs as co-executors of their estates, not just family members.
Okay, bringing in an outside perspective.
Yes. And they often establish trusts, like the examples of Mr. Ring's trust or Aunt Sarah's, the Cinderella sister trust. These are carefully structured to distribute funds only when beneficiaries, like grandchildren, reach a measurable level of maturity. And that maturity is often defined very specifically, like demonstrating the proven ability to earn a good living independently for a certain period.
Ah, so it's conditional. Earn your own keep first, then you get the inheritance boost.
Exactly. This method provides delayed reward. It ensures that the inheritance supplements rather than replaces self-sufficiency and responsible behavior. They are essentially giving without spoiling the character of the recipient. It protects both the wealth and the family relationships.
Okay, let's shift back to playing offense now, looking at those final factors, 6 and 7, choosing the right occupation and being proficient at targeting market opportunities. The study makes an absolutely overwhelming case for self-employment, doesn't it?
The statistics are pretty undeniable on this point. More than two-thirds, over 66% of the non-retired millionaire households studied were headed by self-employed business owners or professionals.
Two-thirds, that's huge.
It is. And these individuals are 4 times more likely to be millionaires than those who work for others in traditional jobs. The ability to control your own income, to direct your capital within the business, and crucially, to receive untaxed appreciation in the value of that business over time is just a profound accumulator advantage.
But the research cautions, importantly, that it's not necessarily the type of business that matters most, but the character of the owner.
Precisely. That's a key finding. The list of businesses owned by the PAWs studied is incredibly vast and varied. It completely shatters the myth that you need to be in finance or high tech to become wealthy through business ownership.
So what kinds of businesses did they find?
All sorts. The study includes wealthy janitorial services contractors, mobile home park owners, successful rice farmers, scrap metal dealers, even rare coin and stamp dealers. What these diverse owners share is that PAW character profile. They're frugal, conscientious, disciplined investors, and they recognize that the business itself is their primary wealth-building vehicle, not just a job.
However, it's also true that the general self-employed path can be really risky. The average net income for the vast majority of small sole proprietorships in the U.S. is often shockingly low. The study cited figures around $6,200 annually for many.
That risk is absolutely real. And it's why many wealthy PAW parents, the ones who are perhaps more focused on stability for their own children, often steer their kids towards becoming self-employed professionals.
So not just any business, but professions like physicians, dentists, optometrists, veterinarians, accountants, maybe specialized attorneys. These fields rely heavily on intellect and highly specialized skills as the primary capital, which generally offers more stability and much lower failure rates than, say, opening a restaurant or a general retail store in a highly competitive market.
So the PAW advice for the next generation might be, aim to control your career through self-employment, if possible, but maybe choose a professional field where your specific skill set provides some insulation from intense cutthroat market competition.
That seems to be a common pattern, yes. For example, the study found that something like 94.9% of dentist offices were profitable during the period studied.
Almost 95% profitable.
Yeah, and often generating very healthy returns on receipts, sometimes exceeding 50%. Compare that to high-risk, high-capital industries like, say, coal mining, where only about 1 in 3 operations were profitable during the same period. The professionals often achieve high accumulation through that combination of stability, consistent high income potential, coupled with applying those essential PAW defensive habits: frugality, saving, investing.
Okay, shifting now to factor 6, targeting market opportunities. That massive generational wealth transfer we keep hearing about, this study estimated it at potentially $2.1 trillion just in estates of $1 million or more in the coming years. That must create enormous niches for savvy business owners and professionals, right?
Absolutely. The biggest opportunities often lie in providing specialized, high-value services to the wealthy or to their heirs. This is sort of the financial ecosystem of wealth accumulation itself.
What kind of services are we talking about?
Well, think about the growing need for expert tax and estate attorneys, essentially providing defense against the tax authorities for these large estates, or specialists in asset liquidation and appraisal. When heirs inherit complex assets, maybe a family business, a valuable art or stamp collection, commercial property, they don't just need a general financial advisor. They need a niche expert who can help them liquidate or manage that specific non-cash asset effectively and fairly.
That makes sense. And even on the consumption side, perhaps highly specialized services are growth areas because the affluent, the PAWs, are often willing to pay a premium for personalized attention and expertise.
Absolutely. Specialized medical services, for instance, like high-end cosmetic dentistry or certain types of plastic surgery, or boutique financial consulting firms that deal specifically with unique situations like illiquid assets or complex trust structures. These are examples of businesses that can thrive by serving the PAW class effectively. The PAW generally wants quality, efficiency, and specialization, and they're often willing to pay for expertise that increases their efficiency, protects their assets, or enhances their health and well-being.
Let's end this section by revisiting that tension between the PAWs and the UAWs, but this time in a business context. Specifically through that amazing anecdote about Mr. W, the super PAW investor, and the six-figure doggy.
Mr. W. He perfectly encapsulates the PAW ethos, doesn't he? Brilliant offense and targeting opportunity, combined with extreme defense and frugality. He was an investor who specialized in buying distressed or neglected properties, often where others saw no value. He once described a strategy where he bought up all the units of one specific style in a new, high-end condominium complex as they came on the market. This allowed him to eventually control the resale market for that unit type. He said it was like playing Monopoly, but with real estate. He could leverage the high consumption habits of UAWs who needed to buy that high-status housing from him at his price.
Brilliant. But his neighbors, the UAWs, already living the high-status life in that same condo complex, they were apparently quite put off by his simple, pragmatic lifestyle, weren't they? They tried to force him out using neighborhood covenants.
They did. They became sort of obsessed with his nonconformity, his refusal to play their status games. They passed a specific rule stating that residents' pets must weigh under 15 pounds, knowing full well that Mr. W owned a beloved 30-pound dog. They were clearly using the dog role as a pretense, hoping to force him to sell his last remaining unit in the complex. This became the famous six-figure doggy incident.
Okay, so they tried to use rules to enforce conformity, and Mr. W's response, it sounds like it was a masterclass in using financial leverage against status obsession.
It was absolutely decisive. He calmly threatened to turn his last remaining condominium unit over to his company's profit-sharing and pension plan, and he would allow his blue-collar assembly line employees to use it 52 weeks a year on rotation for their vacations.
Oh my goodness. The thought of assembly line workers vacationing in their exclusive condo complex.
It instantly terrified his status-conscious UAW neighbors, whose primary concern was maintaining property values and their precious social image. The thought of those people using the facilities was horrifying to them. They immediately backed down, rescinded the pet rule, and let the 30-pound dog stay.
Wow. The PAW won because he had financial independence and the leverage that comes with it. The UAWs lost because their entire identity, their house of cards, rested on maintaining a fragile social status that was easily threatened.
Exactly. Mr. W's story is the perfect summation, really. True wealth isn't ultimately defined by the ability to spend lavishly, but by the ability to not have to spend, and the quiet power and freedom that genuine financial independence grants you.
So after this really rigorous examination of the research, what should you, our listeners, take away from all this?
I think the core message is that the reality of wealth accumulation is often quite different from the popular image. It's built primarily through relentless personal discipline, efficiency in how you allocate your time and money, living demonstrably below your means, and consistently prioritizing financial independence over any outward display of social status.
Right. The successful PAW is usually the actual millionaire next door, living quietly and modestly. Not necessarily the individual who feels compelled to drive the latest foreign luxury import or wear the most expensive designer watch.
And remember, the primary determinant of your net worth over the long haul is usually not your income level, but how effectively you control your spending, how strong your financial defense is. If you earn a massive income but suffer from what the book calls the spends, you're essentially trapped on the hamster wheel of high consumption, always needing that next big paycheck.
Yeah, the high-income spender, the UAW, they end up supporting the luxury goods industry and the high-end service economy. They're working incredibly hard just to feed that machine, often without building lasting wealth for themselves.
And this leads us to one final, perhaps provocative thought for you to consider, which ties back to stewardship and efficiency, particularly around taxes and accumulation.
Okay.
The truly affluent PAWs are often very strategic about taxes. They tend to minimize their realized taxable income money they actually take out as salary or dividends or capital gains right now, and instead they work to maximize their unrealized non-taxable income, which is primarily the appreciation in the value of assets they hold on to, like their businesses, stocks, and real estate, which they don't sell.
Ah, so the wealth grows on paper, tax-deferred or tax-free, until they strategically choose to access it.
Exactly. Whereas the high-income spenders, the UAWs, they realize a huge portion of their wealth annually, often just to support their expensive lifestyles. This makes them, in effect, the government's best customers when it comes to income tax.
Because if a UAW wants to buy a high-status item, like that fancy car, they often have to realize maybe 2 or even 3 times the actual cost of that item in income, just to cover the taxes first. That just erodes their potential capital base even faster.
Precisely. The PAW accumulates that appreciation tax-free or tax-deferred until they strategically choose to sell or realize the income, often much later in life or in lower tax brackets.
So this raises a really critical question for you, the listener, to maybe mull over this week as you think about applying these principles in your own life. What percentage of your total wealth is currently working for you, locked up in assets, and realizing those unrealized, often tax-advantaged gains? Versus what percentage is being regularly liquidated or spent for immediate, highly taxed consumption? Are you playing both offense and defense effectively, or are you perhaps just perpetually fueling the consumption machine?
A phenomenal thought to end on. Really encourages us all to embrace that frugality, that efficiency, and that long-term perspective.
Indeed. If you enjoyed today's discussion, be sure to subscribe and visit fatterwallets.com for more content, resources, and tools to help you live wisely and build wealth with purpose.